Welcome, Pleiku, Vietnam. My name is AJ Miller. I am the daughter of a Vietnam War vet, and I am in Vietnam reading the memoirs and the letters um, that my father wrote or were written for my father in respect or in regards to PTSD and the Vietnam War. And I was supposed to be today at Camp Anari in the Central Highlands, just south of Pleiku, but it rained like the dickens this morning, and I had a shitty ass scooter, and I was going to be asking for trouble by going. Of course, now it's beautiful weather, um, but I'm in it to win it now. So I'm in this dingy ass um, hotel room. Yes, dingy ass hotel room. And you're joining me to do a little letter reading. So this is the letter that my father wrote in support of his Oscar. My father's call sign was Red 17, and his observer, he was a scout helicopter pilot, and his observer, whose name was Rosie, Red 17 Oscar, was also applying to the VA for 100% disability due to PTSD. And this is the letter that my father wrote to him in regards to all that shit. So, this was written May 17th, 2010, referencing John Jack Rose, aka Rosebud, aka Rosie. To whom it may concern, my name is Wayne Miller, and I was a U.S. Army helicopter pilot with A Troop 7th 17th Air Cavalry, operating in the Central Highlands of South Vietnam from September 1967 through September 1968. For 6 months during 1968, I was in the Scout section flying the OH-6A. For the majority of my time with the Scouts, I flew with Sergeant Jack Rose as my observer. He was Rosie to me. What we did as Scouts was quite simple. With a team of 2 Loaches, light observation helicopters, and 2 gunships, UH-1Cs, we would be sent into an area of operation, an AO, with suspected enemy activity to locate, engage, and finally evaluate enemy units moving into South Vietnam from Laos and Cambodia. We located enemy units by forcing them to fire on our aircraft. The Northern Vietnamese were under orders to not engage with the enemy while en route and to remain undetected until they reached their assigned destination or unit. They knew full well that if they fired on us, we would immediately have their location and very quickly know the makeup of their unit. They also knew their survival was significantly diminished, as we could bring the wrath of God down on them with gunships, artillery, airstrikes, or the entire 4th Infantry Division, if need be. By its very nature, however, this was an extremely dangerous mission, and we did this every day. For Scout helicopters to effectively force the enemy to fire on them, it was often necessary for the Scout team leader to slow to a hover at treetop level or lower to blow trees away and open up small patches of ground as we moved. The idea was to make hiding impossible for the enemy. And to force them to shoot at us as their only possible response. This was a tactic developed by our unit, particularly adapted to the new OH-6 and the C model gunship. We used it the entire time Rosie and I flew together. It can be argued that it was a faulted tactic in that the losses of aircraft and personnel was abnormally high. However, we were highly effective in flushing well-hidden individuals and entire units into revealing themselves, and we attained a very high kill ratio, despite our losses. Sergeant John Jack Rose was my Scout observer, my Oscar. I love the possession in the letter that Rosie wrote on behalf of my dad. He writes, "He was my pilot." And I like the way my father says, "He was my Oscar." Rosie and I were extremely effective scout team. Use your words, AJ. Rosie and I were an extremely effective scout team in this very unusual game. We were usually armed with Rosie's Car 15, some hand grenades, smoke grenades, and anything else Rosie could come up with that could be controlled, and the venerable minigun. The minigun was mounted on the left side of the helicopter, which is what my father operated. Though there were times when we engaged at longer ranges and at high speeds, it was most likely that we engaged within a few feet of our target. For us, it was usually Rosie who did the killing. It was not possible to remember all of the individual incidents where Rosie opened fired on hidden northern Vietnamese soldiers, but I remember most, and I can say that most engagements were of no more than a few feet away. We both saw the faces. We both know of the times when it was nothing more than a jammed weapon or a desperate scramble under a bush that gave us the second we needed to take them out before they took us out. We both remember the times when they fired first and we barely escaped with our lives. Too many of our guys weren't so lucky. Rosie and I have not spoken since Vietnam. This afternoon I spoke with him for the first time in 43 years. I know what he's going through because I have the same issues. He told me about the one incident that is reoccurring in his mind, and I remember it vividly. It unfolded as most of our engagements did. From a low hover, we identified newly uniformed and equipped northern Vietnamese soldiers lying off the trail. We knew they were terrified as we slid over top of them. They weren't moving. They had no time other than to lie down and pull their packs over their bodies and to curl into a fetal position. In the cockpit, I radioed our wing and the gunship cover that we have troops lying directly underneath. Definitely northern Vietnamese. Rosie has his weapon trained on them as best as he can as I slowly pedal turn the aircraft, putting Rosie directly overhead. We silently agonize that there isn't one more soldier that we haven't seen behind our aircraft. It's the one we don't see that can suddenly bring this all to an end. "Shoot," I say impatiently over the intercom. Rosie empties a full clip into 5 young soldiers. I see them open up individually, like flowers. Tight green packs are suddenly human beings with arms, legs, and faces. They don't fire back and simply unfolded after taking several rounds each. Whether it was 1 or 2 or several, it always looked the same to me. Not like the movies with spasms and drama. As Rosie fired, real humans opened slowly into lifelessness and stared at nothing. It is horrifying to me today. Rosie and I killed a lot of people. I hereby certify that the information I have given is true to the best of my knowledge and belief. Wayne C. Miller. So that's the letter that my father wrote on behalf of Rosie to the VA in support of his claim of 100% disability due to PTSD. So yeah, that's one of the images that apparently was just reoccurring, like a reoccurring video in both of their heads for the past, or for those 43 to 45 years that they didn't talk to each other after flying together day in and day out. These people go out there and they sacrifice their sanity for their country. They deserve to be taken care of. Please follow me. If you have anybody in your life who is a Vietnam War vet and would benefit from hearing other people's stories, or feel the need to tell their own story and you feel that this would be helpful for them or interesting, or families who have Vietnam vets or any veterans or any people who have experienced extreme trauma in their families and encourage them to reach out to those PTSD victims, or people living with PTSD. They need to tell their story so that they can heal before they die. My father died of leukemia before I got a chance to, and my brother and my mother got a chance to really interact with all of this information. So, thank you, and pass me along. Follow me if you want to hear more from, can you see it? Rosie and me.